You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your game tickets from the longtime trusted source in Wisconsin, Ticket King. Visit their locations in Milwaukee and Green Bay, or just go to their website, theticketking.com. Again, that's theticketking.com.
Check New York Bozo! New York Bozo! New York Bozo!
I got to get my biceps a little bigger.
Yeah, you can always work on that.
Or I could sure use a hot dog with chili.
You know what time the game starts? Hey, you got any left-handed footballs? We need to fire him. Is anybody else tired or is it just me? Good thing I'm in shape. You got any eligibility left? I got some advice for y'all. Take 2 weeks off, then quit.
Pack to the Future is brought to you by The Ticket King. Whether you're making the trip to see Aaron Rodgers and the Packers play at legendary Lambeau Field, you want to see Giannis and the Bucks at the beautiful Fiserv Forum, or the Badgers, Brewers, or any concert tickets you might need, The Ticket King is your source no matter the occasion. Visit them online at theticketking.com and search their selection for yourself. And remember, there's no such thing as a sellout when you can go to The Ticket King. One more time, that's theticketking.com.
We are back with another episode of PTTF Podcast. I am your host, Duke, and I am joined by Matt. Say what's up, Matt.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Matt, it's going to be tough to bring some energy to this podcast today after a Packers loss, their second loss of the season. They go down to L.A. To face the Chargers. Final score of 11-26 for the Packers' second loss of the season. Matt, it was a tough one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we're bringing more energy to this podcast than the Packers brought to the game yesterday. So, it was really tough. The offense just couldn't get in any kind of rhythm yesterday. I think penalties had a lot to do with that. Really having to convert a lot of second and third and longs. That's really not what this offense is predicated on or has really been successful with the last couple of weeks. So lots of holds, lots of false starts. And then, really couldn't, force-feeding Devontae Adams as many targets as he kind of had yesterday isn't a really successful way to run an offense either. So, as much as we've been saluting Matt LaFleur the last couple of weeks for coming in really prepared for his opponents, yesterday, just that team did not look like they came ready to play. There were some people calling that a trap game, and hard not to prove yesterday that it wasn't.
Right. Yeah, it was most definitely the Packers' ugliest game of the season, and something that Matt, I hate to say this, but in the seasons past where the Packers have started off hot, let's go back to 2015 at the earliest. If you recall that season, they were 6-0, and they went down to Denver, another AFC West team. They went down to Denver and just absolutely laid an egg. If I recall, Rodgers had like 80 yards passing in that game. And it was an ugly game that actually really shifted their season. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen for the Packers in a negative way this time around, but it gave me a little bit of, remnants of that game because, Rodgers threw for 161 yards. He had a passer rating of 14. And like you said, there was absolutely, it seemed at times there was just no rhythm on the offensive side of the ball whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think back to that Denver game, and there are some similarities in that sense. Like Denver had some really good pass rushers that disrupted Rodgers the entire game. Right. They had a really power-running offense and kind of an aging Peyton Manning. I mean, that team won the Super Bowl that year. That was such a good football team. So I don't see the Los Angeles Chargers necessarily doing that this year. I know they're finally getting the other big thing that people kind of negate from yesterday. The Chargers are finally starting to get healthy and get people back. Like Melvin Gordon's back. Keenan Allen's been hurt for a little bit this year. Hunter Henry's missed some games. So that offense, the offensive line's a little banged up for them, but they still have some talent on that offense. Right. So that really gave them some fits. But this Packers offense needs to perform better. Like that, at the end of the day, it's very simple. They really, you've got two bookends. One was an All-Pro, and the other should be a Pro Bowler this year. got absolutely torched yesterday and really didn't give Rodgers any time to throw the football, and had too many penalties. Like it just was not a good performance by the guys up front, and it was absolutely the difference in the game because, in the first half, for as bad as the offense played and as bad as the defense looked at times, they were only down 9-0 at half. Like that's
right.
You can come back from that.
Right.
But they didn't adjust very well, and I think Rodgers kind of took some shots because he felt like he needed to put everything on his back, but really, they just needed to convert some first downs and get some points on the board.
Right. And speaking of first downs, I mean they had 11 passing, first downs, but the problem was their third downs were 2 for 10. I mean, and then 0 for 1 on fourth down. The Packers had 49 plays to the Chargers 68, 184 total yards for Green Bay, 442 for the Chargers. Basically the Packers numbers are probably half of what the Chargers put up in almost every category. And, it was a tough one to watch because I think for the first time all season, we saw a couple games early on in the season where the defense, kind of carried the team and, forced turnovers, gave the ball back to the offense. And then, we had a couple games where the offense these last few weeks had been really, really explosive and also taking some pressure off the defense. Yesterday was probably the most uncomplimentary game that, the Packers have put together certainly this season and certainly in a while. It was pretty bad.
Yeah, and again, I can't put that much blame on the defense. Like when the offense isn't sustaining any drives and you can't really get a blow, it's tough. You're constantly being on the field, and this defense is predicated on bend but not break. Like they absolutely have given up some big plays at times, but when it came down time to shut down in the red zone, they absolutely did it. They only let up, 2 touchdowns in this game with how many yards this Chargers offense produced. I mean, that they did enough to keep the Packers in this game through 3 quarters, and then the offense just did not answer the call. So, I just don't. I don't see this game as being an indicator of something larger. The defense has been this the entire year. People are saying, oh, this is, the defense is really showing its true colors. No, this defense has been predicated on turning the ball over, bend but not break, and, really standing tall in the red zone. So they did their job through 3 quarters yesterday, and the offense absolutely did not do their job. They did not come to play yesterday. And again, like I said, the offensive line is the most responsible for that game.
Right. Yeah. And we can kind of get into this a little bit, some of the things that were good, so we might as well talk about that list because it's fairly short. Yeah, some of the things I had noted was, and this is good, man, the Packers escaped, pretty healthy. And, despite, Devontae Adams returning, Alan Lazard led all receivers with, 44 yards. And, it was good to have Devontae Adams back. I'm not going to be one to jump on this whole, the Packers offense is better without Adams train.
Oh, God.
But the red zone defense, as you alluded to, was standing tall for the most part really well. But they were on the field a ton. And, I mean, I get it, man. They're going to wear out, But all in all, I think they escaped fairly healthy. Nice to see Lazard, getting some touches there and showing what he could do a little bit. But yeah, what else do you got to add to the good list?
I'd say to the good list, there isn't a whole heck of a lot. Mason Crosby had a good game yesterday. He made a long field goal. I know he's had some struggles recently, but I really can't draw many positives from this game. There just wasn't anything that I can really confidently say, this gave me a lot of confidence in this team moving forward. But yeah, I would say, with all 3 facets of this team underperforming yesterday, Mason Crosby was probably the one bright spot that I saw.
Right. Yeah. Again, I'm with you, health wise, hey man,
Yeah, that's huge.
They played 9 games this season, and I think, knock on wood, right? But in relative to the past, we've seen this team at this juncture in the season be way more banged up than it is now. So we can be thankful for that at this point. And yeah, like you said, the red zone defense was solid at times.
Yeah, and honestly, you're going to see it in the weeks moving forward. They're going to get a couple of guys. So obviously, Jay Sternberger will be brought back into the fold a little bit more. He's finally healthy, so the tight end crew will be a little bit more deep. I think they'll make a decision on Ibrahim Campbell this week because they have to. I think that'll only help the run defense because he was that Raven Green linebacker before Raven Green was ever a thing.
Uh-huh.
So. But yeah, health is a big part right now. I know I think I tweeted something out before this game, like this is the healthiest they've been since the Bears game. So there were only 2 guys that were questionable on that list, and one of them didn't end up playing. The other one was Devontae Adams. So,
right.
That'll be a big factor moving forward. And, it really helps that, they have this letdown game a week or 2 before the bye, because then they can kind of just regroup and, watch the film and then burn it, learn from it. But this is absolutely a burn the film kind of game because I don't think it's representative of what this team is. And every single team has it. New England had a game like that last night against the Baltimore Ravens. So, it's an any week kind of league where you can lose to any team, and unfortunately the Packers number was yesterday.
Right. They can all lay an egg, man, and unfortunately, it was their day. Let's talk a little bit about the bad. For me, I had a couple things, and then I got several things on the ugly list. On the bad, tackling was an issue. Their running backs, I think it was Eckler and Gordon, they really, really feasted on, forcing, I believe, missed tackles, and they were just slippery in the run game. The other thing I had noted was, I think, gap assignments. I believe it was Zadarius Smith, alluded to it after the game that, at times, he wasn't just where he was supposed to be. And I think these guys all, they're smart enough to know what they've done wrong in their respective game. I will bring up a guy like Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark has really been kind of overshadowed in this defense. While he's notching some tackles and stuff, it almost seems like, we're kind of looking and having to dig through, some of the stats and the plays and the highlights and stuff to notice a guy like Kenny Clark. There was some explosive plays, the big one, the 56-yarder to Williams on that pass that, Alexander tried to undercut. Again, Alexander took a risk there, and it did not pay off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and honestly, I think you alluded to something that kind of bothered me the most yesterday was the gap assignment was bad. And Kenny Clark, I think he hasn't been on the injury report necessarily, but he hasn't been the same since I think he left the Dallas game a little banged up. And I don't think he's played to the same caliber since that game. But to your gap assignment point earlier, I think one guy that showed up in the stat sheet as having a lot of tackles, but definitely struggled in this game was Blake Martinez. Kind of, a lot of his tackles were downfield. He was, 7-yard runs constantly, but he was making the tackles. So he wasn't really gap sound, filling those holes to make that a 2 or 3 yard stop. So this is kind of the second week in a row he's had those struggles. I know he's had some moments this season where he's looked really solid, but with a lot of the depth around him being thin, he's been asked to play a lot more, and in coverage assignments that's not necessarily his strength. So I think he's just kind of wearing down a little bit, and my hope is, and I've alluded to it a lot, Ibrahim Campbell is that guy that I look to in the next couple of weeks who could be a savior for this defense, where you're kind of giving Blake Martinez a little bit more of a blow. You can play BJ Goodson a little bit more. You can play Oren Burks. You can play Ibrahim Campbell, these guys can kind of switch in a little bit more and give Blake Martinez a blow, because at the end of the day, he's playing so many snaps. I just think he's wearing down.
Hey, that very well could be. I mean, it's kind of like when it comes to, football in general, I'm not a big blame it on one guy kind of person, and I know you're not doing that with Martinez.
No.
Something that I've felt, is, the defensive line. I mean, I feel like when they're doing their job, obviously the inside linebacker is able to kind of sweep up and clean up the mess easier. And there was times where I feel like it was just a bad combination on both. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Martinez sometimes didn't get off the block. Sometimes he, jumped the wrong gap. And then other times, there was wide open holes for some of these running backs to just find their way through. And you're right, maybe a guy like Campbell, and, I had a little point on that. I don't know if it's time, because I saw this on Twitter yesterday, but I don't know if it's – I've heard people pound the table for guys like, Campbell, guys like Hallman, Jackson, obviously a second rounder who has really been a non-factor most of this season. And then, of course, coming back from IR Sternberger, is it time to kind of pound the table yet for some of these guys to, test them out and see what they can do?
It absolutely is. I mean, you were looking at the game. The game yesterday should have absolutely been that type of game where, all right, nothing's working for us. We need a spark. We need to have somebody come into this game and really change the momentum a little bit. And they just had nobody. But to your point, I wasn't, I'm a Blake Martinez defender in that sense. Like, I know what he is. He is a great run defender. And, I know his limitations though too. And, he's being asked to do an absolute ton right now. And that it doesn't play to his skill set, and it doesn't play to this defense's skill set. So, but here's the other thing is he's a linebacker. He backs that lineup. And if that defensive line isn't playing that well, that really affects his play. And really, they got manhandled yesterday. And that just, Kenny Clark, like you said, hasn't been playing great football. Montrevious Adams has been okay. Dean Lowry's had some good games, but all of them were invisible yesterday.
Yeah, I think by and large they've, and it could be things like you said that they're battling through. There's some stuff that we really don't know. Like you said, guys don't necessarily always show up on the injury report because they're just battling through things. But all in all, I mean, this defense, it's been holding itself together. But there are times where they do just look worn out. And I know some of the guys that you mentioned, the Kenny Clarks and Blake Martinez, these guys have played a ton of snaps for this defense. At this point, I want to see what some of these speedier linebackers that we have, guys like Oren Burks and a guy like even Ty Summers. I don't know where they stand as far as, their mental grasp of this defense. But, hey, man, I don't think it hurts to start trying to get them a few snaps a game, get them incorporated on some kind of level, like you said, to spell a guy like Blake Martinez, who's playing 100% of the snaps almost every single game. I mean, that's a lot of mileage for a guy in the middle. And, Blake Martinez is, for what it's worth, I mean, he notched 12 tackles yesterday. I mean, we've got to give the guy some credit. He is an absolute, warrior when it comes to, I think just kind of his endurance and his availability. But again, he's playing with a broken hand, I believe in. And, I think it's been a tough assignment for him, given his situation and also given the play of the defensive line.
Yeah, but I completely understand that. And this is just, it kind of keeps supporting that, this front seven just needs to get right. And I don't know if they've been able to really, through the last couple of weeks, the biggest concern has been run defense. And sure enough, that was the absolute killer yesterday. I mean, both Gordon and Ekelar had, 80 and 70 yards rushing. Like that's a killer.
Yeah.
You're going to lose a lot of football games if you're giving up that many yards on the ground.
Yeah.
And next week is going to be the ultimate test. I know they did really well against Zeke Elliott, but Christian McCaffrey might be the best running back in the league, and he's tearing up defenses right now, both on the ground and through the air. So they're going to need to figure out quickly how to defend, really talented running backs. So I'm hoping they figure out a little bit more. Maybe they give Josh Jackson some more reps. I think that could help in a lot of coverage schemes. They struggled with Hunter Henry a lot in that respect, and maybe they just kind of throw Josh Jackson out there to cover some of those tight ends. I keep saying Ibrahim Campbell, but I'm almost at a loss because yesterday they just got absolutely embarrassed on the defensive side at times. In the running game and against tight ends, they don't have any answer for a team that can get big with their tight ends or can get them out in space with these running backs, because they just haven't been strong in the tackling front, and they just haven't been strong with their linebacker play from that standpoint.
Right. And while I'm all for, I think there's a lot of speed on the field, with guys like, Alexander and King. Both of those guys run really well. And even Williams, I want to see, Josh Jackson, I believe, checks in somewhere around 6'2", and I think Holman's about almost 6'2" as well. These are some of the bigger body guys, and they're both physical and they can run. Maybe it's time that, they got to possibly look at, switching out a guy like Redmond, and seeing if one of those guys can kind of, grasp onto something in there, because you're definitely right. They've got to, get to that point where they can start stopping what these tight ends are doing, and also be good, run support defenders, because at this point it's something's not working, and they're definitely going to need to kind of mix it up. I'm not, let's. I think we'll both agree and go on the record and saying there is no reason to push the panic button right now. The Packers are 7-2. They are atop the NFC North standings still, and they're I think third in the NFC overall. And with a 7-2 record, but again, these are issues that they're going to want to get addressed, because come playoff time, man, that's when, every team's going to throw the kitchen sink at you. And the Packers right now are somewhat, allowing this to become a prolonged issue.
Yeah. And, it's kind of to that point. I think a lot of the Packers were kind of flying a little too close to the sun the last couple of weeks. Everybody was riding high off a pretty good winning streak for them there.
Right.
And, when you get punched in the mouth, it doesn't feel good. Like, it sucks. But you have to recognize at this point last year, this Packers team was 3-4-1. This is a team that you have seen great strides in. They're still learning. This is a new coach. This is a new offense. You have a lot of new players on the defense. There are going to be growing pains associated with this, but I do like your point of trying to incorporate some new bodies in this defense. And Kadar Holman's probably one of those guys that adds a little bit of speed to this. He's a bigger body. He's 6 foot, but he runs a 4.4 40. That can shut down a lot of the speed problems on this defense. Including Josh Jackson. He doesn't necessarily fit. He's definitely more of a zone corner, but if you play him at safety or in a hybrid role, I think he would play very well within that role. I think you would have to grow in it a little bit, and there'll be some growing pains associated with that. But you need to play to, we've said it the last couple of weeks, you need to play to your player's strengths. And that's one of his strengths is he's a great cover guy. He's not a blazer. He's not a really fast guy, but he's a great cover corner. He's a great playmaker. So, including some of these other guys that you just really haven't seen a lot of. So I'm hoping that's kind of what they look at in this Carolina game. It's kind of a growth opportunity, trying to see what some of these other guys have, because one thing I do want to kind of talk about at some point is, the Packers stood pat at the trade deadline and kind of assumed that this team was good enough to compete in the playoffs. So you're hoping that, some of this depth that you think you have on this team, you can play and kind of trust.
Right. Yeah, I think I like the depth. if you're asking me today, if I like the depth, there's been flashes of it, man. There's been flashes of it, throughout the, obviously in the preseason with some guys, and then just knowing that there's other guys that can play. I guess right now it's kind of a race against the clock. It's how quickly can some of these other guys, if need be, step up in a pinch. The guy that is a little bit of a mystery to me right now is Oren Burks. I know he had that injury. I know all those things, but I'm not really sure why he's not on the field. I'm not sure why he hasn't, unseated Goodson in that role alongside Martinez. It could be that he's still recovering, but at this point, like you said, I think it's worth trying. I think it's worth looking into. A guy that I was really high on was Ty Summers. I mean, that guy runs like a 4.58. The kid can run. Again, I think it's more of an assignment thing, a mental thing at this point, not so much the athleticism, because I think the athleticism's there. But again, I think he just needs to, kind of get his head around. But, if the Packers were forced into, having to, barring an injury to a guy like Martinez or even Goodson, and be forced to put in some of these guys, who's going to be the next man up for that defense?
Yeah, and honestly, the last couple of years, Gutekunst has gone into the offseason and the draft with a clear goal in mind and trying to draft some of the more athletic guys. Ty Summers is one of them, and it's essentially trying to buy a lottery ticket. Ty Summers is that he was a 7th round pick with a great athletic profile, but he had very clear flaws. One of them being wasn't the greatest tackler in the world, and he definitely saw that during the preseason. But those are the kind of guys at this point, and especially yesterday when you're not really getting anything out of your other linebackers, you got to give some of these guys a try.
Right.
These reps will only mean more going down the road. And especially, a guy like Josh Jackson, you spent a 2nd rounder on this guy.
Right.
You got to try and get reps for these guys, and they're not going to learn enough in practice or in the film room. They got to experience this kind of stuff. There isn't anything like playing on the field, and in a game where you're getting your butt kicked, there's no better opportunity to try and get something going in that game. Just throw somebody else in there. So, I just, again, I kind of fall back on it, and we probably should shift to the ugly section of this because that would be most of the game. But,
right.
I think the game plan was probably the ugly for me. I don't think that Mike Pettin came into this game with a very good game plan. I think he's kind of struggled to adapt to some of these, run-centric offenses with good tight ends. They've kind of played 3 of them now, and they've struggled pretty mightily against them. So those being Philadelphia, Kansas City, and now San Diego or LA. I want to say San Diego, but it's LA. And they've almost lost, 3 of those games if it weren't for some pretty heroic efforts from Aaron Rodgers. So,
right.
Honestly, he's playing very loose coverage on tight ends. He's playing, really, not gap sound defense. It doesn't look like it's a very cohesive unit the last 2 weeks. I just can't wrap my head around it, and I can't understand. This defense is so good at man coverage, and he runs a lot of zone, and he runs a lot of 3-man rushes, which I absolutely despise. But, I want to see him kind of adapt this defense a little bit more. It just seems like he's kind of stuck in his ways the last 3 weeks, kind of trying to figure out, all right, well, we need to protect, Savage coming back from injury. We need to protect Blake Martinez. You just got to let some of these guys play and kind of come up with a little bit more of, all right, we might take our licks a little bit more in the run game, but, we really need to shore up the passing game because they've gotten beaten at the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. There's been times where, it is, some head scratchers out there. I think I saw a screenshot from somebody yesterday, and it basically showed, all the corners about 7 yards off the receivers on a 3rd and 2, and it's kind of like, I believe they've got the speed. I believe they have the speed to match up with a lot of guys in the league. And I think no less of them being able to match up well against Mike Williams and Keenan Allen yesterday. Press those guys at the line and make it tough for Phillip Rivers. For whatever reason, there was times where it just seemed like, whatever they did, we weren't in the right call. And, there's going to be times where, Pettin, as much as I think we all really like the guy and value him, maybe like you said, he's had a little bit of a trouble, finding or how do you say it, tailoring those game plans to his players' strengths, and I think that's been a little bit of an issue, going forward. For me, one of the ugliest things, yesterday was penalties were really, really bad. There was 8 penalties. The run defense was, again, incredibly porous, and, Aaron Rodgers, again, as you mentioned before, there was just really no rhythm. And I don't know, let me get your take on this really quickly. Devontae Adams is back. He comes back, and at times it seemed, and I believe the first 3 drives were 3 and outs for the Packers. At times, I don't know. I mean, clearly I would assume that Devontae's his first read in most progressions, and I don't know if he was trying to force the ball or what you saw, but, it just seemed like the whole spreading the ball thing around did not happen yesterday.
And I think this is kind of the big part is the last couple of weeks they've gotten Aaron Jones really involved in the offense, and he only had 4 targets yesterday. He only had, and I think he had 8 rushes. He's been a huge part of this offense. And as soon as Devontae Adams comes back, you just force feed him the ball 11 times, and he only has a handful of catches. That's not a successful way to run this offense. The offense has been predicated the last couple of weeks on, picking up chunks of yards and then really creating some of this misdirection, including your tight ends a little bit, including your running backs a little bit. I know Jamal Williams had a decent day, but, Aaron Jones has really been that, when Devontae Adams has been out, he's been the number 1 wide receiver. He's been the best receiver on this team. So
he's been he's been the centerpiece of the offense.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, obviously outside of Rodgers, but it's, you didn't see any of that creativity yesterday. And a lot of it had to do with they were facing a ton of 2nd and 3rd and long. And that's a huge part of that. But, even if you're 2nd and long, just pick up 7 yards. Just get those, those quick looks that pick up a few yards. They had a couple of good looks to Devontae Adams on like short crossers. Some more of that, even if you want to try and include Alan Lazard or Jake Kumaro. They took, on those 2nd and long kind of throws, they looked deep. They didn't look for those short underneath routes to pick up a few yards to make those, those 2nd and longs a little bit shorter. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. It's a shame because I think this offense had been really finding its rhythm the last couple of weeks. But I think they'll figure it out. Even before Devontae Adams went down for injury, he had a really great game against Philadelphia. But they couldn't find a rhythm as an offense. And I think they'll find that rhythm the more and more Adams gets involved in this offense. It's just, figuring out what that looks like. And I honestly think the biggest catalyst for me on offense, I think Sternberger coming back will be a huge thing for this offense because it'll be a little bit more creative. They can use the 12 personnel a little bit more often, get 2 tight ends on the field. It'll allow for some better run looks, but also you can get a little bit more creative from the passing perspective. You can Sternberger's honestly, he's more fleet of foot than any tight end they have on the roster that's not named Bob Tonyan. But Bob Tonyan hasn't been able to get healthy the last couple of weeks.
Right.
It's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow because a lot of what I've loved about Matt LaFleur the last couple of weeks has been his creativity, and you saw none of it yesterday.
Yeah. One of the things that, we got to talk about this because, you got a guy like MVS who was touted very much to basically be, the Packers, number 2 receiver in this offense, opposite Devontae Adams. And, he didn't even have a target yesterday. That to me is concerning considering, obviously the Packers didn't have a lot of drives, they didn't have, great time possession. Their plays were limited, but, this is a guy that has got to, get involved in this game, has got to, show up more than the one, 30, 40-yard catch a game, if the Packers are really going to move forward. You mentioned Sternberger. Sternberger is a kid that can really run. And, in the preseason, we saw, some tiny flashes from him. And I think he, if you watched his tape a little bit at Texas A&M, Jay Sternberger can make plays. And at this point, we've got to see somebody else, get the ball in their hands, make big plays, make the contested catches. Jimmy Graham has struggled with that. Mercedes Lewis has, for the most part, not been much of a factor in the passing game. And so, yeah, man, I'm all for seeing a little bit of creativity, see this guy come in, get a couple plays under his belt. But again, I say back to, MVS, I want to see something from these guys that are behind Adams in the receiving core. It's not enough at this point.
Yeah, and it's painful to see because you're kind of hoping that MVS was, you saw a lot of promise last year, and you've seen some promise this year. Like, he's had some great deep balls, but I think what you're seeing is he might just be kind of a one-dimensional wide receiver, and that's okay. Like, that's absolutely okay. He runs that deep route really well. And for having that guy opposite of Devontae Adams, that can be an absolute, weapon on this offense. The problem is, it's only a weapon if you can get some other guys open, and they just couldn't get anybody else open yesterday. So, if you're selling out for the Devontae Adams underneath and you're selling out for MVS over the top, you don't really have anybody else opening up the field. Alan Lazard's been really good at times. Jake Kumaro has been really good at times, but I don't think they've had anybody else consistently really winning their one-on-one battles. So I know my comparison for MVS the last couple of weeks has been, and this is kind of a name that might scare some, but I think it's a pretty accurate comparison. MVS is very similar to Martavis Bryant. He's a really good deep threat. But he's not going to break a game open for you. He's not a possession wide receiver necessarily. He's just going to be, a 2 or 3 catch type of receiver that'll get you 75 yards, but you'll get 30 yards on those receptions just because he's got that blazing speed. So, that's why I want to see, the tight ends get involved a little bit more. My hope is that Bob Tonyan gets healthy soon because I think he was supposed to be a pretty big part of this offense, including Jay Sternberger, because I think they need some of these receiving tight ends, and I think that kind of opens up this Matt LaFleur offense a little bit more because it opens up that ability to create more misdirection because you have more athleticism at the tight end position, and it opens up your wide receivers who aren't necessarily game dominators. Like Alan Lazard, I think will benefit greatly from getting Bob Tonyan and Jay Sternberger back because honestly, he's a solid route runner. He's a big body and he has great hands. Obviously a few drops aside, but who hasn't had drops? But I think he's somebody that can really benefit from getting some tight ends healthy.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the creativity has been excellent, the prior weeks and, I think we got to end this on a high note, Matt. Again, the Packers are 7-2. They
Yep.
are atop the NFC North. You know, the entire division lost yesterday, which was really crazy. So we didn't want to lose that game yesterday, but hey, it is what it is. Everyone else ended up losing their game as well. So, nothing changed as far as the standings go in that regard. But, let's talk quickly, man. Let's move on quickly. They've got the Carolina Panthers coming into town, and they are 5-3. They beat the Titans yesterday, 30-20. And this is a team that can, they can really, really hurt you with their rushing attack. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, he's second amongst all running backs in the league right now with a 5.3 yards per attempt. And unfortunately, Green Bay's given up over 4 yards per carry in each of their last 3 games. And so, we are expecting a tough one in Green Bay. What are your quick thoughts on just this Carolina team that's coming to town?
It's a very run-centric team, and I hope that Mike Pettin kind of looks at this and says, Kyle Allen is their quarterback, and I'm absolutely selling out on the run. I don't know if you've seen Kyle Allen the last couple of weeks. He just has not looked very good. So I'm not necessarily worried about, I shouldn't say that. The last couple of weeks have been concerning from the Packers from the standpoint they made games a lot closer than they should have. But This is a team that the Packers absolutely can beat. Christian McCaffrey is a very talented runner, and he's going to get his. I'm just going to say it right now. He's going to have a really good game against this Packers defense.
Right.
But it's a team that you're going to see a lot of yards gained, but I think you're going to see a lot of that bend but don't break out of this defense. And I'm hoping the offense can continue to, build off of what they've done the last couple of weeks, and not including this Chargers game, and use a little bit more of that creativity. Hopefully, Sternberger and Tanyan getting healthy will help a lot. Hopefully Devontae Adams coming out healthy from this game will be a little bit more unleashed in this next game. Hopefully they'll target Aaron Jones a little bit more on the offensive side. But I think a lot of people are going to be shell-shocked from this Chargers game, and rightfully so. That was a really bad football game, but this is still a really good football team. They're 7-2. They've gone through the tough part of the schedule. This is a playoff team, and they're going to play potentially a playoff team this upcoming weekend, but they have every opportunity to win this football game. I just think, this team hasn't faced a ton of adversity yet, and when they faced a lot of adversity this past Sunday, they didn't know how to do it, how to deal with it. So I think they come out strong in this one and, really get the job done. And I think they can do it.
Right. I definitely think that this is a very winnable game for the Packers. Again, they do need to, kind of take a quick look in the mirror, but they got to get to work on this Carolina team. I hope that the Packers, from a defensive standpoint, would attack them by really trying to key in on the run and making, Allen kind of beat them. And I think if they can really sort of limit McCaffrey, and like you said, he's going to get his, he's going to do work. He's just he's that dynamic of a player. A good game for the Packers would probably, be keeping that guy, around 100 yards. They're gonna feed him the ball, whether it be screens, short passes, angle routes, all kinds of things that they're going to use him for. But I think if they can really just limit them and force Allen to beat them. I read a stat. He has thrown 2 interceptions in 2 straight games, and so that bodes well for the Packers, and that he does tend to, force throws and potentially turn the ball over. So I think if the Packers could maybe, kind of let their, guys that can play, solid coverage, let them cover and go after McCaffrey and just try to slow him down. Kind of a similar plan to what they did against Dallas, which was really try to make Dak, beat them. I think if they do this with Allen, Pettin's pretty good at confusing the younger guys. And so I think he'll definitely be able to throw some curveballs, at Allen, a young guy that's probably not going to have seen too many looks that Pettin's going to throw his way. So let's hope the Packers come out with another win, and hopefully heading 8-2 into the bye week, because it'll be a great time for them to, lick their wounds, get ready, and really gear up for a very, very difficult San Francisco team. So without jumping too far ahead, the Carolina Panthers are the next one on the docket. And let's hope that the Packers go 1-0 this week, Matt.
Yeah, so I honestly think they can go 1-0. If I could put a number on it, this team probably I'm confident in this week. I think they're going to come back strong. I think I'm predicting 34-20 Packers.
Hey, there you go. I like that score. I'm gonna. Oh man, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna. I think it may end up being just a little bit tighter of a ball game. So I'm gonna say, let's say 28-21, Packers victory, and we all ride off into the sunset for the bye week. So, Matt, do you have anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, a lot's going to be made over the course of this week that they kind of stood still during the trade deadline and didn't really add anybody. But this team has been pretty conservative from that standpoint for the last couple of years, and you'll see a lot of teams make a lot of moves and move a lot of draft capital to do it. The Packers are not going to look at any one year. They're going to look at the future, and they have Aaron Rodgers for the next 4 years under contract. So to a lot of people who are kind of looking negatively at, the front office for this, all I have to say is RELAX. This team is going to be fine. They're still a really talented team. This is going to be a really fun team to look at next year when they've kind of rebuilt a little bit more, if they don't already have a team this year to compete. So I'm really excited. I'm shrugging off this loss. I hope everybody does as well.
Great way to finish up the show. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. He's at mbaumgartner807 on Twitter, and I'm at Pastor Cheesehead on Twitter. You can find the links to all of our shows and, of course, just our regular weekly, Packers talk as we're on Twitter. We thank you so much for your support, for listening to the PTTF podcast. With us, he's Matt. I'm Duke. We're signing off. Matt, hit us with a big go, Pack, go.
Go, Pack, go.